Every time they see you, that fucking waifu pillow.
Hold on one second. Let me look at that. Welcome back, guys. We are back with the late game, episode 28.
I hope you're proud of yourself.
So for those of you who don't know, that are new to the show, I got a body pillow for Christmas, and I couldn't resist the chance to buy one of these fucking covers, right? And so Steven just linked this image. I think that might be the funniest thing I've seen this week. That's awesome.
Well done, Steven. Well done.
Well played. Oh, beautiful. Anyway, so this week, actually today, a couple hours ago, Blizzard teased that they have a new unit coming. You know, they've been talking about releasing the Starport unit. So this is I'm gonna capture this. This is the tweet they released, and then it was accompanied by a picture of a starport, right? And so what the missing letters spell is Liberator, right? So it's kind of, it's cool. The unit's going to be called the Liberator, and I actually have something special for you guys. I already have a model of the Liberator here with me today. So, as we know, the Liberator, they've been talking about it. It's going to be able to transform into two forms, right? So we have the first form of the Liberator right here. Okay, it's the one model, and then we have the second form of the Liberator right here. It's a little bit of a different model, right? So we don't really know the functions of the Liberator yet. We haven't had this explained, but we will hopefully know soon.
On stream? What?
Yeah, you can't see me because
I can barely see it. Was it just like a comforter or what?
No, dude, it's fucking Liberator sex pillows, man.
Why?
Jesus Christ.
Okay.
Anyway, so professional show, professional production.
Did you get it like is Winter sponsored by them? Is that what you got?
So I was thinking about that when I was thinking about making the joke and like showing the pillows.
About having sex with Winter.
You know what? Yeah, I was.
How do we get that? No. When I thought about the showing it, I was like, I thought about all the people mocking Winter because he always says he's gonna go have sex with his girlfriend. I'm like, I really don't want to open myself up to that. But then I'm like, I have zero shame, so I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna make this cringe-worthy moment. And I believe that we have achieved optimal cringe, ladies and gentlemen.
A sufficient cringe.
I feel like that's your everyday goal. Is try to make people cringe.
In the late game, there has to be a certain amount of cringe.
Have we achieved the full cringe, or do I need to demonstrate the Liberator pillow on the waifu pillow?
I mean, you put the waifu color. You need to put the waifu cover over the Liberator pillow, so that way when you go to I'm assuming what is that pillow going to the woman's like ass or lower back?
Yeah.
And it'd be like pretty much a threesome, I think, right?
Kinda.
If that was the waifu pillows on that, yeah, there you go.
Yeah, there we go.
Three-way pillow sex action.
Yep.
Getting real.
Bite the pillow. Bite the waifu pillow.
Can't hear anybody just liking his volume is too loud compared to others.
Ah.
Uh-oh.
Liking. Shut up.
Liking. Why is your volume so loud?
Oh, I lowered it. There we go.
Hog the whole conversation with you.
Right? I am such a prick. But anyway, I adjusted the sound, so if it is too low, let me know. But anyway, with that, no, I don't use the Liberator. Didn't you see that shit's in the plastic still? It's never been used.
What the fuck? Dude, how much did that cost? These are expensive as hell.
Yeah, I bought it a long time ago. Never got to use it. It's a sad story.
Did you spend $100 on one of those?
Fuck no, dude. It was like on sale and shit, and it's the mini one.
Okay, because these look pretty expensive, man. I don't if they came with the girls on here. I mean,
man.
Oh man.
Now we learn Lincoln has.
I genuinely contemplated whether or not it was worth going into this one, like opening myself up to what.
Well, I just wanted to keep digging into like the deeper and deeper levels.
I was
just playing to your joke. I was trying to.
Thank you. And I appreciate
you unlocked
it.
You unlocked. It's like the Family Guy jokes where they just go on too long and it's like, oh, it's funny, and then it's like it's not funny for a while, and then it gets
funny again.
It's funny again. That's what just happened.
All right, then this is a good place.
So when did you buy these? What was the?
So I was in Afghanistan as a contractor, and I was making a little extra money, and I had a fiance back home, so I bought them while I was over there.
You had a fiance. Well, this just got like really dark.
All right.
Never mind. Okay, move on.
Keep digging, Steve.
I mean, it wasn't.
Or maybe that's just part of the cringe. I mean, we just keep going and going and going. Fuck.
Well,
This is
man.
terrible.
No, it wasn't anything.
So what? So like to follow it, I guess. So what happened? It was a bad color, so she hated it and broke up with you, or what?
No. Literally, honest to God, like the relationship didn't. It wasn't like one of those stupid, like, oh, you're in Afghanistan and then we break up kind of things. It was just when I got back, like I had a box of other stuff that I ordered along with that, and it just kind of stayed in the box. Never felt the need to pull it out.
You didn't send her the pillows like thinking that she could use them on her own, right?
No, like so we lived together, so just shit that I ordered got sent to the house.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Oh, so you didn't necessarily buy those pillows to use for her, so they were for somebody else. Is that why you guys broke up?
What? I don't even get where this is going, man.
Man.
Okay.
I just want to say that if you guys are watching the chat right now, Neuro has the absolute best responses to anyone saying anything in chat at all points in time. It's
Wow.
just
It's
an
called the
enjoyable
art of
experience.
counter BM. So counter BM means you see people who are being rude, they're being trolly, and you think about what they're trying to accomplish. And you play in a way that counters what they're trying to accomplish, rather than taking offense to your ego and feeling insulted. That's the default reaction. Someone's rude to you, you're like, oh, they're mad at me, they're saying mean things. The counter BM says, how can we mind fuck this person to the maximum level? Because they're opening themselves up to exploitation by taking a stab at you.
See, I don't know how you stay calm through this shit. I see that stuff and I get like, go fuck yourself, man.
I think the best thing that people do, and I think it's unintentional, or maybe it is intentional sometimes, and it fucks me so hard. It's like if I don't do it anymore, but back in the day, back when I played League a long time ago, and I would type a ton in that game, I get fucking mad at somebody. It's always awkward when you see somebody who's like, oh my god, dude, you've got to stop feeling like you're playing fucking horrible. You're throwing the whole fucking game. You're so fucking bad, dude. Why the fuck are you even playing? And then the guy types something back, and he's like, yeah, I'm really sorry. I'm just having like a really, really rough game. Like, I'll try to pick it up more. And then like you feel like a total piece of shit. You're like, oh fuck, dude. Damn, I'm sorry, man. Like, I guess everybody has a bad game. Fuck, man. Oh god, those are always the worst. If someone says like, no, man, you're supposed to call me like a faggot or something, or like you're supposed to like go hard, or like, damn, now I just feel like a total asshole. Holy shit.
So perfect example here. Boom 10125. Neuro is a penis sucker. Quote Christopher Hitchens say, claims asserted without evidence can be dismissed without evidence.
Wow.
And
Bam.
then the BM event is over. And then you move on to the next BM event. It's fun. It becomes a fun exercise.
It's a
Each
fun
troll-
game. I enjoy playing it myself. I'm just not as
Yeah.
good as Neuro yet. I got
Trolls
lots
have
of-
power levels, and then you think of your own troll or other troll power level. And by beating small trolls, you get more XP, and then you can build up into like a counter BM hero unit, to where you can beat lots of them at once. It's good. I think too many people have the avoidance strategy to trolling. Someone comes in and they're rude, and they're like, "Oh, I'll ban this person." No, you got to box with them. Get it going on. See who's stronger. Take the challenge.
Beautiful.
I love having you around, Neuro.
That's some beautiful stuff, man.
All right, so we've got like one of the best panels here. 4 pro gamers, Steven, JaKaTaK, Neuro, and then of course myself. So let's get back to the show. We will probably have many more cringe moments to come. So, foreign performance versus Korean performance. Bunny, we're gonna take this right to you. We're not gonna dick around. After I type this status is there we go. All right, cool. Bunny.
You want me to just talk about?
No. What I want to do is, so like I said before, I was told that you were one of the hardest working guys in the business, and it shows. It really does show with your performance and results at the tournaments. You very frequently take out Koreans. So what I want to know is, what do you do to be as good as you are? How do you practice? Do you just watch replays, or do you go in and you have certain focused ways of addressing problems in your gameplay?
Well, honestly, I just play a lot and I watch a lot of Korean games. Like almost every high-level Korean terrain game there is, I will watch. And that's really how you try to keep up, I think. I don't think you can figure out StarCraft on your own like that. You have to sort of learn from the best players and watch the Koreans play, because that's sort of the only way you're going to beat them.
Mhm.
Which kind of sucks, because that means you're always going to be holding behind, like, because you can't play with them, which is sort of annoying. But I think just playing a lot, being not getting like mad, trying to improve every game, having a good attitude and stuff. I don't think there's any secret thing that I do. I just work a lot, I think.
When you look at
do you have any like a group of players that you play custom games with if you're like trying to learn a new style or a particular thing you're trying to work out?
Yeah, there's always my teammates, of course, great to play with, and there's a lot of people in the EU scene that I like to play a lot with. I don't know, ladder, it's a lot worse than custom games for sure. On the European server, there's a lot of stupid games that you get. So I think going for only custom games for tournament preparation is always going to be the best. Unless you can play on the Korean ladder, then maybe.
So why do you think it is that the Koreans are ahead in the meta, or developing or innovating?
Well, they just have a stronger base of good players. When you have that many good players all playing together every day on the ladder, they're naturally gonna figure things out a lot quicker than if you just have like 1, 2, 3 good players or whatever playing together. So it's just like the large base of very, very good players playing together every day, talking together and stuff. And the foreign scene doesn't really have that. There's only like a few players who are actually good enough to beat the Koreans in the first place, so it's kind of hard to keep up.
Puck,
what you're saying is there need to be more people as good as you so you can practice with them, is what?
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. Like the quality of practice on Korea is just going to be naturally so much higher. If we had a lot of more good players in Europe, the difference, like we could keep up better. I guess it sort of raises exponentially. Like the more good players, the better everyone is going to become.
But you'd also have to work together. Just having a few Koreans playing on the ladder isn't going to do it. You guys would actually have to have them working together in the same groups that they do when they're in Korea. So it would be
not necessarily. Just being able to. I mean, that does help, but just being able to just like go on a ladder and know, like I know this from experience. If I go playing Korea ladder, there's like fucking like probably 300 or 400 people that would like always beat me in games that are better than me. So I get to jump into games with person after person after person that dwarfs me in mechanics and strategy and like everything. Like that's awesome. On NA, there's like that actually actively play NA. There's like what, like 5 or 10 people that even play North America at a decent level anymore. Like all the good players are all playing on Europe or Korea. Like nobody actually plays on NA. Like there's a huge difference. Even without being in like specialized groups, just being able to jump into a server with like hundreds of really good players is like an amazing thing.
But aren't there ways that
you need though, like I think that it's really useful to have like some sort of a critical mass of strong players, because getting up to that number is really where it shows. So it's like, I think, maybe the point that Lycan was alluding to there was the idea of like, there are 3, really strong Korean players that play North American ladder. It's like, that's helpful if you happen to be playing while they're playing and things like that. But I mean, it really has to come to sort of culmination where there's a critical mass of players, so you can always hop on the ladder and just instantly queue up against someone who's really strong.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, I think that's like a big factor, but definitely, I mean, and I think where Lycan's pushing towards is that, actually working together in team houses, and more importantly, not necessarily in a team house, but when there's no language barrier and you've got those high level players that have social connections talking to each other, I think that's where a lot of learning happens as well. Like I know whenever I'm preparing for a specific tournament match, where I've got like a while to prepare for it, it's normally if I'm practicing with another player whose play I really respect, I think is really good, and it's kind of discussing with them in between games where I feel like I probably learn the most and make the most strides in my understanding. And I think even though the Korean ladder, it's such a big part, I think it's also the fact that you've got so many players, playing customs in between teams, but also within their own teams. And I remember, for instance, back in the day, Prime never had any really good Zerg players, or they were always short on Zerg players. And something we saw for like a long time with Prime, and this is back when they were a really good team, is a lot of their players struggled to be consistent in their versus Zerg matchups for like the longest time, because a lot of them would just ladder and play in-house mostly. And it was interesting because I remember Creator at the time, because he won WCS Korea back in 2012. He was the only one who was consistent against Zerg, and that's because he would practice with Dongrigu and a few other players like a lot of the time. So I think the in-house practice definitely helps a lot as well. And I think when you have a limited scene of players like in the foreign scene, you kind of need to have you need to make use of those custom games more and more. Like Bunny said, you know, you've just got to play customs because often the ladder just isn't going to be quite as good practice. And you know, I guess I'm in a unique position in that I'm down here in Australia and I can't play the European server, so it's either NA or Korea, and I get great practice on Korea. But to a certain extent, if I just play Korean ladder all day, I end up in isolation, and my understanding of the game, if I'm not discussing it with players in Europe and in America and trying to play customs, I start getting set on just playing the meta, and I get really stuck within a certain meta. I go to a tournament, some European player plays way outside of that meta, and it's like, whoa, what the hell is going on? Like, no Korean plays this style. I'm so confused. So I think communicating about the game,
Right.
having the connections is just as important.
I want to add something. I think something that's very underlooked is the value of actually having a coach. Because a coach is someone that's put there, probably paid in most situations. I want to imagine a coach not being paid. That's overlooking a bunch of uniformed mindset players who want to be the best that they can be. Otherwise, they wouldn't be living in a house. And all these players share the information with the coach, in which the coach shares the information with all the players if they need help with something. And that just takes so much time away, or it gives so much extra time to the players who just want to keep playing, so they don't always have to watch all the VODs, they don't have to look at all the bad games. The coach can find a good game, share it with the player, they can go over it together and get everything out of it instead of just wasting so much time.
Yeah, I don't know. For me, like the discussing part is of course important, but by far the most important part is just having good opponents to play with. Like when the Koreans were here in the ladder, I felt like when they first came to Europe, I was losing a ton, but then after a while, I was always able to like beat them or go 50-50 with them. This was true for like all the Patient, Saxbury, MC, Sean, all these guys who came to Europe. Eventually, when you play them a lot, you just find ways to win. Like it's very hard to win against someone when you never, like someone who's a lot better than you, when you never get the chance to play them. Which is why going to tournaments can be so frustrating sometimes. Like DreamHack, the recent one where I lost to Fantasy, he like busted out some new build I hadn't seen before in Europe, and I just lose to it because I never played against it before. And then it's like, hey, did I just get outplayed, or like did I just lose something I didn't have the chance to play against?
Back in the days when Minigun was like a huge ladder champion and probably like one of the top like 2 pro dosses in North America, if not the best. Like if you go back like 2 or 3 years, he used to complain about the same kind of stuff. He said that it was really fucking frustrating that like he could, I think because of his connection, like he could play EU with some latency, but like the NA was the best and he could never play in KR. But he said he hated it. Anytime he played Koreans in tournaments, he's like, it's so dumb. Like I've never seen any of these builds before. And even if you've seen the builds, like you cannot just look at a replay or just look at a fucking like a pro game casted and then be able to jump into a game and play it perfectly in a tournament against a Korean if you haven't had extensive practice against it. So yeah.
So okay, 2 things I want to talk about. First of all, is the ladder, is it not at the very most a sign of mastering the mechanics and an understanding of the game? Because there's a different level between being able to get top, of the ladder and being able to win tournaments, right?
There's a difference, but like, so like here's like a thing that a lot of people don't understand this. All right, you ever hear people say like, hey, like Bill Gates dropped out of high school, right? So I don't have to go to college, right? Bill Gates didn't drop out of fucking high school or college because he was too dumb to do it. He dropped out because it was holding him back. There's a huge fucking difference there too. It's the same thing when you look at ladder. People are like, just because you're fucking challenger in ladder doesn't make you a pro player or whatever. Yeah, sure. But if you are a pro player, you can get to the top of the ladder every fucking time, you know? So like, I don't think that being like a high level ladder player necessarily means that you're going to do really well in tournaments, but it's not like there are all of these people that can like finish first place at like a Gfinity or like first place all these tournaments that would just like be stuck in like mid-low GM.
Exactly. So when it comes to now, you have what you can do on the ladder, what you can do from your own skill and your own practice. I'm going to send this to you, Snute, okay? Obviously, you and Bunny do very well against Koreans. You guys are some of the top performing foreigners in the scene. What do you do to compensate? Could players not compensate for the lack of Korean ladder, the lack of team house by working together, by, different methods of practice than just saying, I don't have this ladder of, 400 people better than me, like the Korean ladder, to go work on.
Yeah, I think Bunny brought up a really good point with watching VODs from Korea. I think that's one of the most useful things you can do, because then you stay up to date of some of the current strategies in Korea. You get to see the different responses. You get to see what works and what doesn't work. You can see mistakes. You can see where players get ahead, stuff like this. So analyzing every single game possible for your race from Korea is very important. It doesn't have to be only Korea. You can watch high-level games. Basically, anyone who's better than you or the same skill. Sometimes even watching lower level opponents can be good as well. Basically, the more you watch, the more you learn, the better.
Mm-hmm.
And I think ladder can be useful practice as well. And if you do well on ladder, that's usually a very good indicator. But custom games with players of equal or superior skill is always preferable.
Right.
Although you want some diversity as well. Like, for example, I don't think it would be healthy for my CVT to only single-handedly play against Bunny all the time, for example. It would be useful to play against other players as well, because no matter how much you mix it up, there's still such a wide range of styles, and you definitely want to have some variety in your opponents as well, even if it does mean going down a little bit in skill level.
Right, Bunny.
Too, it's important too, because like Bunny's good at a particular set of things, and he's weaker at a particular set of things, and mixing that up when you want to be playing against Bunny's best styles possible, and that's the way that you are going to like get the best out of Terran practice. And maybe there's another Terran that plays in a different style that you need to prepare against, and that's going to be better practice for that. And I think that getting to know your options and the strengths and weaknesses of your various practice partners can have a big effect on how quickly you can improve.
Yeah, Bunny, I want to ask you something. You had brought up the point, you said, it's hard to beat someone that you've never played against before, right? So
Yeah.
let's take this. Let's say you just take two players. In most cases, you could take a pro Korean and a pro foreigner, and you put them together, and the Korean's going to win in a lot of cases.
Yeah, most
There has to be a way that you can close that gap without knowing your opponent, right? Knowing your opponent is extremely important, especially in StarCraft, which is a huge game based around information. But aside from that, is there not a way to close the gap of baseline skill?
Yeah, that wasn't exactly what I meant. I meant just more if you're playing someone who is like better than you, it's kind of hard to know how to even win when you don't get the opportunity to play against them. Of course, like prediction and stuff is important if both players know each other.
Mm-hmm.
But there's players who are better when like none of the players know anything about each other because their basic skill is just better. And then there's people who are better at preparation, playing different styles, and expecting what the opponent is going to do.
Right.
But,
So what I meant is so I was just using that as an example, part of the conversation. But what I mean in general is we all know that there is a deficiency in foreigner skill compared to Koreans. Is there a way you and Snute have done it? You guys have closed that gap significantly. Is there a way that more foreigners could be doing that?
well, honestly, you just have to play so freaking much. Like, if you want to just have enough average skill and mechanics to go toe to toe with Koreans, then you just need some insane amount of practice, I feel. And it's not going to be very efficient because you're going to be playing against Europeans instead of Koreans. So, yeah, I don't know if there's any secret to it.
Do you think that if we were talking about this, and I'll send this to you, Puck, we've talked about this offline. Do you think, first of all, what is the issue with foreigners working together? We see a lot of Koreans working together. Crank, I did a show with Crank a little while back, and I did an interview with him. And in the interview, he said one of the big things that the Koreans do is they talk to each other. So inter-team, inter-Korean, they communicate and discuss the game. It's not them just grinding ladder games. They're discussing all the information, right? So when I brought that up with you, Puck, you had some things to say. You want to go ahead and just share your thoughts on foreigners working together or the lack of cooperation?
from my experience personally, I feel like when you ask a lot of foreigners to practice, they'll practice. They'll practice like no problem. But a lot of times they like oftentimes don't really say much in between games. They don't really talk too much about what happened. Um, Pig is possibly one of my greatest friends for wanting to practice with because he's like very helpful with everything. But like most of the time when I ask other players, like it's just straight up going into games, and if I ask for advice, some of the times it's not even helpful at all. So I don't know. It's I just feel like people kind of tend to themselves a lot more.
Well, I think too there's this inherent like conflict of interests when you're practicing with someone, especially with the way WCS is set up, where it's just all the foreigners fighting amongst themselves.
Yeah.
It's sort of like you don't want to give away your strategies or too much of your ideas because then the other foreigners will have an advantage on you. I think it's really counterproductive to like the foreign scene as a whole, like coming together and like improving, because you need to be open about your ideas so that they can like birth new ideas and new solutions to problems.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, Korea is the same way though. That's also all the Koreans playing against each other. So I don't know if that's much different.
I think the game moves so fast though, and I think when players are like, "Well, I might play you in the next round of WCS," it's like, well, yeah, you're gonna have like weeks and weeks to prepare for that though. Like,
Yeah.
is your whole play style going to be invalidated because they saw what you were doing a month ago in the matchup? If so, you're not practicing enough StarCraft. Like,
but do you think that
I
mentality is
think.
prevalent? Because I've personally seen it when talking to different players and things about their
It
practice.
definitely is, and there's situations where it's valid, but I think there's still enough players in the scene that like there are periods where like everyone's preparing for their WCS match, and like it's hard to find someone because like your practice partners happen to have different matchups to the one you want to practice, and then the other people, like if you don't have a personal connection, there is always a trust thing with some players. Like you don't want people sharing replays, and there are some people out there who, without even thinking about it, will just like, this person practiced with me, I'm just going to give the replays to my other person because I'm a better friend with them. And it's like, it's not many people that would do that, but especially if you haven't met someone at an event, and we're all from different countries, we're all spread across the globe. It's very hard to just trust someone and play with them and show something which you're relying on having a little bit of surprise in most of your builds in a tournament, right? As soon as your opponent knows what's coming, it's a huge disadvantage. It's why there's barcode accounts all over the ladder. It's why even people swap barcode accounts to practice before a tournament, because their other barcodes have been identified and stuff. People are constantly trying to hide this stuff. But I think that all being said, the WCS is once every couple of months. There's like a month between each round of it. Like, it's not something where you really need to completely hide everything. Like certain cheese builds, certain really specific weird builds, like only practice that with your very close friends that you aren't going to have to play against. But other than that, like I think you can always be discussing the game more. And kind of like what Puck said about some players, they kind of want to practice, but there's not much discussing going on. I do think discussing the game more. I think getting in custom games and actually people working together can help improve. I don't think it's ever going to match the Korean system. I think what Bunny says is spot on, in that like at the end of the day, you do just need to play a shitload and you just need to practice hard for a long time. But in terms of actually minimizing the amount of time it takes to get to that level, that's important, because there's a lot of players who start getting into StarCraft, they start practicing a lot, they get decent, and then they stop playing because it's not returning the investment they're putting into it. And this is something which I think Lycan's been trying to get at the whole show, is like, if you're given the opportunity to be a pro gamer, shouldn't you be doing more in order to get on that same level as the Korean players? And that's the question we come to when you get people throwing kind of foreigners is shit, they don't work hard comments around the internet, right? And it comes down to, I think there's a lot of young players that don't get the chance to catch up to the skill level. And part of it is they're never taught the right mechanics. So what we have is players years into being a pro gamer learning camera hotkeys, learning a new hotkey setup, learning to use their control groups differently. Bunny was saying he just learned camera groups, was it 2012, after playing for a year or something like this?
Yeah.
Like imagine if you just had a friend, like the moment you hit Master League, and like everyone in Master League in your community is like, dude, you got to use camera hotkeys, you got to do this, and like you learn it straight away kind of thing. I think there's a lot of shared knowledge missing from the English-speaking foreign scene. In Korea, because Brood War's been around for so long, you've got this huge shared knowledge pool. And I think that's part of having more high-level players, more infrastructure, more regular events. And I think discussions like what we're having now are actually important to make sure we're all kind of sharing our ideas together so that it's mainly for the newer players. Once you hit the level of a Bunny or a Snute, I think you guys practicing a lot of customs, discussing the game, watching a hell of a lot of VODs to try and keep up, that's all you can really do. But I think for the lower players, the newer players, the ones that keep the scene fresh, keep topping up the talent, that's where we really struggle getting new talent to the same level.
All right, so that's actually Pig brings up exactly what I'm getting to, and what kind of upset people the other day when I brought it up on Twitter is that I basically said that if you are full-time, and what I mean by full-time is if you do not have other things that are taking up your day, if you have the time, the resources, I don't care if you're living in your mom's basement or your team actually pays you a living wage, if you have the time to dedicate what you need to be a successful pro gamer, and you're not optimizing your practice, if you are not spending that time changing up, like weightlifting, right? There's eventually a point in weightlifting that you're going to hit a plateau, and if you don't change your training regimen, if you don't change the way that you are working and growing as a weightlifter, you're never going to lift more, right? And I believe that the brain being a muscle.
Oh, we talking about muscle confusion now? Oh
What?
shit, boys.
Yeah, there we go, muscle confusion. So you need to find new ways. Eventually, you're going to plateau, right? There are people that hit GM at age 15, right? Because they just have that natural capacity. They're autodidacts. They can learn quickly. They can adjust. They go on a ladder, they play one game, and immediately they realize, hey, this is the mistake I made, and they're never making that mistake again. Those are the people that skyrocketed to GM in their first year of playing this game. But that only gets you so far. And I think that's a great way to look at a lot of the foreign pros. You see these people that some of them maybe did work their ass off, or some of them had that natural talent that got them onto these teams. Now what are they doing, right? There are people who, this isn't Lycan just coming up with this out of nowhere. There are both pros, there are commentators, and there are Korean pros who have said foreigners don't work hard enough. Now, I believe that's the issue. I believe that we have people like Bunny and Snute that work their asses off. I know Pig and Puck, I know you guys have worked your asses off. But there are these people who don't, yet they have the opportunity to work their asses off. And they let that, and they squander that. So really, is the foreign scene, do they need an incentive? Some people have brought that up. Some people say, yes, they need an incentive. There's no incentive for the foreigners to perform. Well, what about the incentive of just wanting to do well, to succeed? If you don't dig deep and find that within yourself, what if it's money? Is that what's going to make you become a better pro gamer? Does there need to be more money in the scene? Is that really going to create the caliber of pro gamer we need to compete against Koreans?
So I basically listed out the collection of all the edges we've covered so far, and you would say that the net result of Korean dominance is going to be the compilation of all of these edges put together. So it's no single thing that's causing the whole problem. It's all of them working in tandem. So Pig mentioned geography. Players are spread out in the foreign scene. Korea is tiny. It's very easy to move around Korea, practice in different places, go to events. Practice volume. You're talking about people working hard. The amount you train per day, that's an edge. Improvement rate per practice volume. That's about being deliberate and making good use of the time that you're practicing. Everyone can improve on that. Opponent resource volume. That was our discussion about the Korea ladder and the quality of practice, how many good opponents you can possibly face, and how you can face different types of opponents. Sparring communication. The communication between yourself and the people you're training with, so you can both improve over time and gain more value from sparring. Coaching resource, Puck mentioned, someone to hold you accountable, to kind of drive you, inspire you, encourage you. We have team house structure and the team dynamic, where you have people who are also working really hard and just kind of encouraging each other and training regularly. And then regimen, which is something that TLO talks about a lot, which is your gaming, health, life, fitness balance, just taking care of your body as a competitor. So if you add up all of those, you can kind of think about the differences between the Korean team house environments and people who are kind of struggling to compete with Koreans in big tournaments.
I think that a big part of it is delivering, like I think Pig was saying, delivering all of this information to the players who are, professional gamers right now, but the people who are out there that are, in the 1,400 people who are watching this show right now, that are up and coming. They want to be professional gamers, and understanding that all of these things are important pieces, and developing the right mentality of saying, okay, well, I know this guy who only ladders and he's really, really good. So whatever, understanding that sample size matters and that most people aren't, like that. Understanding that loss aversion is something to avoid, and investing in loss and developing that mentality is important. I think and all of that kind of stuff, delivering all of this information and structure, we just have a huge lack of coaches to be able to deliver all this kind of information, this outside of the game information that I think we're lacking a lot of.
I agree 100% with everything that's basically been said.
With everything that has ever been said in the show, including the sex pillow talk, everything.
So Neuro did a great job of highlighting the points that we covered and those issues. So now comes the next step. What do you do to get these people to actually care and to want to do that? Because apparently, being able to call yourself a pro gamer and having the opportunity and the natural skill and ability and the time to improve on that doesn't seem to be enough. How do we motivate them? Is it just a matter of it's not on our... I personally don't think it's on us. I think you need to want it yourself. And end of story. But yeah, I'd like your guys.
I think you might be going a bit too far with saying get these people to care, because I think there are a lot of people who are working really hard and care a lot about what they're doing and trying to improve. It's just that I think most of it comes from misinformation and holding on to old things and running into logical fallacies.
I also believe a lot of pro gamers would love to sit in a house as long as they're like you wouldn't want a person who's extremely negative to go into a house with a bunch of positive people. It just doesn't work out to have a negative person in general to practice with.
I think mentality is huge. It's so huge.
I think just having a team house is a problem simply because there's just not enough money. People won't necessarily feel stable because they don't really have a income coming in every single month, or people don't want to stream to make their money because it takes away from their practice. And there's just so many issues to be had that there isn't just one simple fix.
Yeah. And I want to clarify for the chat real quick, because I see some people making this comment, is that what we're discussing is we're not talking about people who are opting to go to school and part-time pro game. I'm talking about those who only pro game. Those who don't have a job outside of pro gaming. Those who only pro game. Period. End of story. Continue, JaKaTaK.
I wasn't talking. I think Buck was talking.
I'm sorry.
The interesting thing is, there's very few pro gamers who are actually like that. So just to clarify, Puck studies. Puck's one of the most consistent players in North America who, has had a lot of good victories, a lot of good performances, and he studies a lot and often is studying and coming from exams and then flying right to tournaments and still performs very well. But is far from the ideal environment. For me, I do a lot of coaching and streaming, but I've had the opportunity to just practice and just be a pro gamer for periods, and I know I haven't used it anywhere near the full efficiency I could have used that time for. But when it comes to how can people do better, we've given all the reasons what's holding people back, right? Like why are people not doing as well as they could? Why isn't everyone emulating someone like Snute or Bunny here, who's our current top foreigners? And you need to try and emulate and create all of those things that are naturally missing from the scene. And I really like what JaKaTaK said. I think he was on the money. He said, there's logical fallacies you run into. You're practicing things wrong, but you don't have anyone to tell it to you. And it's not because you don't want it. It's just you don't necessarily realize. And this is why I'm big on the sharing of information and people talking and communicating. Because for me, that's how I learn. Because I'm not, I guess, naturally a person who works well on their own. Some people can just practice on their own, really figure out the game a lot better than me. But I don't think most players are like that. I don't think most Korean players are like that. I think a lot of them get shown the path and then are able to follow it. And, it is a lot easier to practice 12 hours a day or 10 hours a day consistently 6 days a week when you're actually showing progress consistently. But it's people hitting roadblocks and not knowing how to get past those roadblocks, which is getting in the way right now. And I definitely think if I was trying to become a pro gamer today, and I was like, all right, I'm in GM, I'm like mid GM, I've been playing a while, and I want to actually get perfect mechanics. Like, where would I go? And I wouldn't know automatically, like, how should I play the game? How should I adjust my mechanics? Like, what's wrong with my play? Where do I find this information? Who do I ask? And you can ask other players, and everyone will tell you something different. And I really like what JaKaTaK is doing with the core, because I can tell he's put a huge amount of research into it. And it's something which I still can't say this is by far the best method, because I'm still learning it. I've been learning it for a few weeks now. I'm back at kind of high GM-ish level, but I'm still atrocious at certain things, because for many years I was using a completely different setup. But it's just like, if we don't even have the information in a set spot where someone can say, I want to be a pro gamer, and anyone in the community who's been around a while can point and say, this is the best place, this is a list of the mechanics you need to learn for your race, go learn that, then how do we expect players to develop to that level? And I think it's people who have been around the scene for a long enough time, the experienced pro gamers, who, as well as the personalities, who need to actually, rather than just saying, you people need to work harder, we need to put the information out there and say, yeah, you've got to work fucking hard, but here's what you need to work on. You need to work on your mechanics. You need to watch your replays in this way. You need to play more custom games. And there needs to be some sort of path. This is what all sports have. You've got a set path you need to follow to become a pro. You've got to go through a series of different, you get coached from a young age. You have different people telling you what qualifiers you need to get through, how you need to develop your game. And you need that system in place, and it just isn't there. So that's what we're lacking. That's what we need right now.
And
So
I think the thing is in a major way, it's not that the information isn't out there and easy to reach, like you were saying. It's about reputation more than anything else, right? So like the concept of using like your whole hand when playing StarCraft is something that I've been talking about for a really long time. But who the fuck is JaKaTaK, right? Like, no one's gonna listen to this guy. And then, like, 3 years later, someone's like, oh yeah, using your whole hand, 5-finger, that's a good idea. It's really difficult, because how are you supposed to know that this idea is the right idea? This idea is actually going to like produce results. And what happens is the logic that gets used is a fallacy called the appeal to authority, where it's just, oh, this player is good, therefore I'll just do what they do and then I'll be good. And the problem is it's a small sample size, right? So it's, there are a lot of holes there. But secondly, StarCraft isn't this kind of field where you can appeal to authority like that. It's not all figured out. It hasn't been figured out for, decades and decades and decades. And then you can say, oh, yes, this violin master, obviously we look at those and then we can see the technique and what's going on there. We have to like logic out and figure out a lot of this stuff ourselves, and not, instead of appealing to authority and saying, okay, this player is good, therefore everything they do is right, say, okay, this is a thing. Like, let's see, why is it efficient? Why is it better mechanically? Or why is it not better mechanically? And especially as far as like you were talking about mechanics, it's logic. It's logic and math. Like, that's just pretty much what it comes down to. And, all of us working together just try and develop like a reputable source where people can say, oh yeah, this is the best way to do this mechanical thing, and these are all the things you need to learn.
So
I think the really important thing here the really important thing to understand is that like nothing in StarCraft is like, this is not like a new or unique area or whatever. Like, these are all really well understood concepts that everybody's known about for probably thousands or definitely at least thousands of years, if not even fucking back in the fucking prehistoric, or not prehistoric, but in the fucking early ages of man, like for cavemen doing shit, like repetition and learning things properly and all this. Like, these are really well understood things. You don't have to be good to teach them. I mean, how many?
So all right, do you guys
StarCraft though?
Do you guys have groups?
New to StarCraft.
Bunny, Snute, do you guys have a group you talk in a Skype group?
Yeah, we have a lot of Skype groups.
So
we talk all the time, every single day, every day.
Hold on. Let me correct Lycan there. Okay, I think what he meant to ask was, do you have any Skype groups where you specifically dedicate and talk about your gameplay? Because I know there are a lot of like the Skype groups
Like
that
the
aren't,
Blizzard's group and all that. Yeah.
that aren't necessarily dedicated to the game chat. Or yeah.
So you guys do talk every day. Like, I mean, are there people who've refused to participate? I'm not asking to call people out. I'm just saying in general. Are there people who are very good pro gamers who have refused to participate in those groups, or just don't constructively contribute to the group?
Protoss players.
Yeah, the European Protoss players aren't very good at bonding with each other. But the closest thing to this is probably the European Custom Games Group, which was an experiment launched by Todd's initiative. It worked out for a while, but then the group expanded to maybe 50 people or so. And some of the most hardcore and proud pro gamers were not happy with the level of the lower ranked players that were brought into this custom games group. And some players also had a little bit of trouble keeping the chat itself clean, since there were 50 people in a Skype group. That usually goes quite badly. So eventually this group didn't really get a whole lot of usage, but there's a lot of closed groups as well. Some for Zergs, some for Terrans, some for just random groups of friends or people that practice a lot with each other. There's quite a few of these small groups that kind of resemble team houses. And I think those groups are probably the closest thing
So would you say
to a physical team house right now?
Right. So what you saw in those groups, you saw the lack of, I don't know if you want to call it a lack of maturity, lack of dedication to the game. You know, and I think that's what it is. In a way, that's maturity, but at the same time, I think it's just a lack of acknowledging the importance of what these groups can bring, and then being able to put aside, you know, either some petty difference or a desire to be stupid and to not, you know, treat this with respect. You know, there is a cultural difference between the West and the Koreans, right? But I believe that I see people bring it up in chat. I'm well aware of it, but that only goes so far. It's a huge thing when it comes to dedication and being able to sit down and put your mind to it. And I think that's, you know, it's not something that foreigners can't correct. We can acknowledge the issue with being able to keep focused. We can acknowledge our issue to try to stray away from the path, you know, the dedication that's required to be one of the best programmers in the world. And I believe that, you know, from the sounds of it, Snute, you're not one of those people. So obviously that reflects. You're able to pinpoint when you need to be serious, and you've achieved that. So maybe that's do the people, you know, I guess the more senior people in the esports community for StarCraft need to go at it and say, hey, no, shut the fuck up. You need to care about what you're doing and participate. Stop being a child.
Yeah, and this is actually something I run a group with Robert Yip, who is a performance psychologist. He works with some esports athletes. I don't know, some of the Team Liquid people might know him. But in any case, him and I started the group called The Sandbox. I talk about it all the time. And we have two Skype chats, one that is particularly just for training requests, and then a second that is for discussion. And it's just, in order to have that kind of a chat, it's incredibly strictly moderated, to the point where people will just leave because they don't like it, because we don't allow negativity, we don't allow venting, we don't allow any sort of non-constructiveness, any sort of logical fallacies or logical flaws get kicked out immediately right away. Not in the people, but if you speak something illogical, you're bound to sort of come up with your source for your information, and you have to speak maturely. And
what do you mean by that? Could you give an example? I'm just curious.
Yeah, sure. It's just sort of like, for instance, we have a player in there who for a little while was like, oh, I just played so-and-so on ladder and I beat them. It's like, that kind of shit is not constructive. It's not helping anyone else get better, so it's not allowed in the chat at all. Or like, oh my God, Snute is so good. Did you see this game? Sorry, Snute, but that's not allowed in our chat. It has to be 100% constructive all the time. Because when you get that like mass of people in there, the only way to communicate at that level is to have this very strict moderation and for everything.
So you have that, strict moderation, and then you're going to have these people though, and it sounds from the sound of it, Snute, you have these people that are too prideful. You know, they're accomplished pro gamers to some degree. Maybe at one point they were one of the best gamers, and then they get into that moment where someone says, hey, that's not what this here for, and is like, fuck you guys, I don't need this group.
I actually think it's really funny that Snute brings that up, because I've known that to happen when I used to play more and I was in some groups in the past. Like, you would see those people that would never play with someone that was worse than them. Definitely not. And very rarely would they play with somebody that's of their skill, but they would always be asking people who are way better if they could play.
So where's the where's the peer pressure though? Where is the other gamer saying, "Hey, no, get back here and play that game"? Like someone leaves the group, like, "No, get back here. We need you and you need them."
You can't force someone to.
You can't force them. No, you can't force them, but you can say something to them.
There's value in practicing with players who are weaker than you, like overall weaker than you, if you want to play against their particular style that's very strong. If they're very experienced...
Yeah, but at this point, you're only preaching to the choir, though, because somebody that's prideful would never let. They would just say, "Fuck you, I'm gonna waste my time."
Well, someone that's prideful is not gonna have success long term, and you just get the fuck out.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I'm just saying that, like, the people that do that. Yeah, there's always things to practice, even playing against people that are slightly worse, but a lot of people don't see it that way. Like there are those people, right? I'm assuming that's who Snute and Patrick Bunny were talking about. There are those people. I specifically remember some Europeans that were doing that back when I was in Poland and shit, in certain groups who would only ever play against people that were better and would never waste their time on somebody who was like of equal skill or lesser, which is kind of interesting.
So what about, so that's kind of where the coach would come in, right? In Korea, you would have a player that doesn't want to play, and you have the coach that is paid by the team to make sure that the players are doing what they need to do, as well as guide.
I might be wrong because I have very limited experience. Somebody like Bunny or Snute might know better, but it seemed to me with Koreans, at least in the StarTale house, I could get a game from almost anybody if I'd ask. There was like that pride shit didn't seem to happen as much of that. I don't know if that was just StarTale house or not, but I could ask literally anybody on StarTale for games, and they would always play with me. Did you guys think it's the same, or do you think I was just the house I was in?
No, I feel like in team houses, that's how it works in Korea. That's from my experience as well. I think this is just kind of how it gets when you have a bunch of Europeans and non-Korean players in the Skype group, and the group gets a little bit too big. Then you have some elitist players that don't like the lower ranked players asking for game, and then you have some people start to flame each other, and then some people get tired of it and they leave, and eventually the group just falls apart. So I think these semi-open groups with 50+ people aren't really bound to be very successful. So even in theory, it sounds really nice. It sounds like something that can boost. Let's say we take everyone in GM and we put them all into one Skype group. It sounds good in theory, but I think practice has shown that the best sorts of communication right now are one-on-one, just asking someone, like I could ask Bunny, for example. And these small closed groups of maybe say 10 to 20, 30 people that get along with each other well, and that's not like somewhere that anyone can get in without being kind of, how to say this, accepted by the other guys first.
One of the things that you have to keep in mind that a lot of people don't seem to understand is when you look at pro gamers, when a normal person looks at a programmer, you think like, okay, well, like if this guy's in a group and shit, like these guys are talking about StarCraft all the time. They're probably like really professional with each other and all of that. That is absolutely not. Like it's almost, sometimes I almost wonder if it's worse. Like a lot of the chats are literally, it looks like a college frat. Like you get a ton of people talking shit. A lot of people just like fucking goofing off, doing gossipy shit. The gossip is insane. Even in groups that are supposed to be dedicated to playing. Even in groups with good people that are dedicated to playing, I know for a fact that there was like the Zerg Skype group in NA with like fucking who was it? It was like, I think it was like Suppy, Henderless, Scarlet, and a few others that would like and a lot of that. And I think it was Suppy was the one that first left, and he was like, it was just annoying being in there because it was literally just shit talking like a whole bunch of other NA players. Like pro gamers do that shit just as much, if not more, than like the average person, where it's like a really fucking gossip heavy.
I bet Kane was in there, right?
Oh yeah, Kane. Yeah.
We're calling out individuals. Watch out.
Like
you'll be held accountable for the truth.
So
you need to keep it balanced. Like if people start talking about their social lives instead of the game, at some point the line gets crossed and people lose interest in the group, and it's not about the game anymore.
And how many times do you come back?
That's when the group gets counterproductive.
And when people start leaving, it's like, how many times do you come back to a fucking Skype group and you wake up and it's like, oh, okay, your Skype group was like elite Zerg, European things. So you open it, it's like 492 unread messages, and you start scrolling through and they're talking about like, don't you think that like this girl Susie's tits are like really crazy on like the tournament shows? It's like, fuck, man, why the fuck am I even in this shit? Like I can go to fucking Reddit and read this stuff,
Yeah, I think
too, it sucks because the people that like from an organizer's perspective, one of these kind of groups, the people that you want to stay in the group are the ones who are going to leave that group when that shit starts happening, you know?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Also, some of the stronger players that you want to practice with are also the guys that can have this sort of social nature in the group. So it's all about finding the balance, and sometimes maybe even explaining to these people that they need to calm down a little bit. But I think in practice, a group can only support that many of, you know, that type of person. And I
So-
think that's why the semi-open groups kind of fail, because you get a really unhealthy ratio of
400
personnel.
people come in, and then you start getting like, and then it gets to the point the group has failed when it's gotten to the point where you've dragged in like friends of pros, and they don't even actually really play, and you just get these people talking, and it's like, okay.
Okay, so
I think
we have
the
these.
secret ingredient is actually having Snute in there, because like from my experience, the only really useful Skype chats I've been in have had Snute in there, reminding people like, okay, you've just posted 300 messages about talking about a random girl or like something stupid that you did on the weekend, and like that custom game chat that you guys were talking about, like that was so useful for quite a while last year, and it's very dead now. It very rarely gets posted in, but for a long time, you know, there was always like Snute and like one or two other people, like I think sometimes Grubby as well, would just be like, okay guys, like shut up whenever anyone would post anything other than a game. And it was good because it kept it really clean, and you could always go there and there'd just be a few messages, and you'd like check when they were posted, and you'd be like, oh, these people might still be looking for games, and you'd PM them all and you'd organize a game, like, and yeah, I think it's just nice to make sure you keep that level of seriousness about it. Like, yeah, you want to improve and talk about the game. Like, this isn't just your social life. And I think partly that happens because like sometimes pro gamers get in the habit of like, I'm a pro gamer, I just sit here and play games all day, right? So but then they're like, oh, I miss socializing.
Okay, so
I want to talk to my friends and like,
right.
you know, have some gossip.
I think too,
Yeah.
one of the most successful things, because I've been like fucking with this for a while, one of the most successful things in the sandbox that we've had happen is the separation of two chats. One that is, you're only allowed to say, I'm looking for practice in this, or I'm accepting your practice for this, or this is what I'm training in right now. And then one that is discussion about the game in a constructive way. I think is really, really nice, because you can really easy just turn the messages off for the discussion thing unless they're discussing something you're interested in. But you can leave your notifications on for the training. It's like, okay, people are training right now, which I think is a motivating factor anyway. It's like, oh, these people are training, I need to get in there and train too.
So to reason up from the first principle of what we're talking about is the problem, people aren't deliberate with their communication. If you're all trying to get better at a game, when you're in a group with a lot of people, first you ask, does this need to be said? Second, does this need to be said by me? Does this need to be said by me right now? Who benefits from this information, and what do I stand to gain from this information? A lot of times, people say stuff that doesn't need to be said. No one benefits, and they have nothing that they could possibly gain by presenting that. So if they did that checklist before they're typing, you'll have much more clean groups. The most
People always
recent
want to vent, don't they? Like people just want.
Oh, yeah.
Like, everyone wants to vent. I think like for me, I try to have like a set Skype group at any point in time, which is my venting group if I want to complain about something. And it's usually literally like I just complain and I like write like this really like ragey, irrational, angry paragraph. And then like I go back and read it a minute later, and then I like write out the solution to the problem. And I have a little conversation with myself. I'm like, I guess I need to go practice this. Or I just, you know, if I'm in a really bad mood, obviously I won't do the second part. And hopefully I'll figure it out later.
But venting benefits you. It alleviates some of the pressure and stress.
Yeah, it's one of those things though. Like sometimes people kind of get on a bit of a rampage and want to like spread the negativity a little bit. Like, no, this is Imba, and like I always feel bad when I do that. It doesn't happen very often, but sometimes I'll be like, no, screw Protoss. The mothership core is bullshit. You know, I need to convince you all that this unit is bullshit. Like it's such a irrational, unproductive way of doing things. So yeah.
I think this type of venting can be okay in a closed group, like the SIR groups, for example. I feel like it's okay to whine there. A lot of the time you can complain about, say, the mothership core, and then someone will just drop a replay, you know, with some sort of fix. You know, if the other guy makes a mothership core, don't make 40 Zerglings and try to beat Photon charge because it's not going to happen. You know, just make drones instead, and then it shows you like this sick triple hatch droning up to 70 supply in no time type of replay, you know. you you get sense knocked into you really fast if you have a group of people that play the same race as you, or maybe if you even have some players from the opposing race that don't necessarily take things all too seriously, and can look past the little tilt that you're going on, because we all play StarCraft, so we all know what it's like to lose sometimes, and I don't think it's too much of a problem to be a little bit whiny sometimes, as long as it's not in one of these kind of professional open groups where it's supposed to be very clean, where it's supposed to be like, yeah, you're only going to look for custom games, not rant about Protoss, for example.
Okay,
So I
so
think closed groups are really good for improvement, and I would recommend anyone watching this to get into a closed group with people that play the same race as you, or maybe even some from the opposing race as well.
okay,
think
so
too-
these groups exist, but is it?
Hmm.
Do you see a lot of pros, Snute and Bunny? It sounds like you guys are very active in these groups. Do you see a lot of pros that are at these tournaments all the time that aren't just low level foreign pros, very high level people, but that aren't as active as you, and do their results reflect the lack of participation in these groups?
I haven't really talked to a lot of people about, you know, how they use Skype, so I don't really have a whole lot of information with this.
I don't know if there's any direct correlation between how much you use the groups and your skill level. Uh, Probably not. There's like an extra thing that's very helpful. If you feel stuck, you can always talk to people. I guess you don't necessarily need the groups to do that. You can also just DM someone from the same race or someone you're good friends with and stuff, and that can maybe help you get a discussion going. But the groups are the most handy thing, and they're really fun to be in as well. So
Yeah, it helps your mind, and it's nice to socialize a little bit. I think it's just one of
Yeah.
the little things that can make you better. It's much more fun than to play alone all day.
Well, the reason I think so heavily about or think so much of the groups is because it kind of replicates the lack of team house and coach structure that you have in Korea. It's like kind of one of the few ways that foreigners can compensate for that lack of, the infrastructure that we always talk about. One question I have is, well, let's look back at the beginning of StarCraft. Let's look at some of the top pros. And this conversation isn't to call out anyone. This is just using, canonical examples of people who were, really great. Let's look at Huck. Let's look at, Nanywan, Stefano, and all these people that were very successful in StarCraft, right? And why were they so successful then, and why are they not successful now or in the later stages of their career before they retired? What changed? Because I feel like in StarCraft 2, because we've seen this, you can look at the ladder for this, for example. You can look at a platinum player now, and you can look at a platinum player back in Wings of Liberty, and you can say that the skill floor has gone up. These players just overall have more knowledge of the game. I imagine that at the pro level, that's the same thing. As the time went on, that skill floor was up. So even the pros, of now, could probably, I'd imagine foreign pros now could go back and kick, Code S level pros 3 years ago to some degree. So why did they not continue? Was it a lack of changing their practice? Did they plateau and never, do that, muscle confusion for their gameplay? Did they stagnate? Did they become lazy? Why did we not see these incredible players continue to be incredible? And anyone who has a thought on that?
There's many things that come into play. You can't just like for instance, like if you're traveling a lot as a pro player and you're winning tournaments, eventually you just get really burnt out, and then you absolutely need a break. Otherwise, you just won't be able to continue. And say if you never take a break from it and you just continuously keep losing, then you're probably never going to get back on top again for quite a while, anyways. Or say that you have a medical issue, for instance, Minigun, he had to take a break from StarCraft and school, for instance, and that becomes very demotivating. Nobody shares often their medical issues with everyone else in the StarCraft community. It just doesn't make much sense unless there's no way of hiding it.
Right.
There's other avenues, such as some people don't see the long goal of StarCraft to be economically viable 5 to 10 years from now, and then they decide to go and continue school full time and put full effort on that. There's just so many different ways you could go about thinking about it. I mean,
Yeah, I think they were really successful at learning at the start, right? I think Stefano's someone who I always remember back in the early days talking to Daishi when Daishi was a very, very young player who wasn't very well known. But because he was in the French scene, he was coming up, he'd talk to Stefano a lot and ask for a lot of advice. And I remember him telling me a few stories about Stefano in the very early days, for instance, spending a week just building like Roachling every game and not caring about anything. His build orders were just like whatever, as long as he hit every inject perfectly. And he just did that for like a week every game. And like Stefano is one of the first players to be very good at isolating individual sort of focus in his practice like that, at least in the foreign scene. And as a result, you could always see that his injects were perfect. And even though, I remember at like Daishi said like at the end of that week, like he had to just take a break. Like he just couldn't. He was so sick of playing StarCraft, he like couldn't play for like almost a week after that. But when he came back, like his injects were just always really good because he'd just ground it into his habits so hard. And he did that with a few different things. And we saw that. I mean, how did Stefano have his initial success? He literally just built a max of roaches faster than anyone else could and just killed them because he was just better at building units. Like he was the first player I remember where like people were figuring out that you would build units in a cycle as Zerg, and this was efficient way to spend your APM. And in between literally every action Stefano would do, he would like tap his hatcheries and tap like SD build drones. And this was like revolutionary at the time because like he had APM and mechanics, and like I think Idra probably did the same thing, but Stefano was very good at isolating those mechanics. And
So what you
Huck
guys are saying?
was-
Go ahead. Go ahead.
no, continue. I was just going to say, Huck was also very decisive and had his very unique understanding of the game, was very good at killing people in very, very special ways. He had a very specific style, and he was he understood how to play that style really, really well.
So what you're saying is that these people come in. In the early days of StarCraft, these people were the people who were quick at figuring things out. They were innovative. They mastered the basics of the game, and the skill floor was low enough that those kind of things could bring a lot of success. But as the skill ceiling rose, we found that people in the Korean infrastructure who had those team houses and all that, as the game became more reliant on focused practice and the finer things within, we see the people that have that that commitment to learning and that setup for learning doing better than those who have to figure it out on themselves on their own.
Yeah, like I think those players were really good at the start and they do have their own flair and talent. Each of those players is very talented and very intelligent, and they did really well for a while. But I think they suffered from the same lack of information and lack of knowledge that the whole foreign scene does. Just because they were great at the start doesn't mean they knew how to take it to the next level in terms of doing more efficient mechanics or improving their learning process in a specific way. And you've also got to understand that in the early days, it was all about learning on your own. And I think as the game progressed and the Korean meta progressed as this group knowledge, as these teams and these people communicating progressed and went beyond that level, and they kind of got out of the grasp, you suddenly got these players who I think were absolutely amazing at learning on their own. And it's like, where are they going to get that same group knowledge from?
Okay.
Do the Hucks and Stefanos just make like a 5-man Skype group and somehow try to match that knowledge? I think it's something where they definitely maybe could have done more to evolve the way they learned and progressed. But I think they suffered the same things that the whole foreign scene did as a whole. And the advantages which they got with their immense skill at learning the game at the start, that's just inevitably going to fade over time.
I think it's just sort of like the whole is greater than the sum of its parts kind of a thing, where if you get people together that are really, really good, and you can get to that next level, even though maybe you don't have a really higher level player than your group of players to train with or anything like that. You can find solutions to problems that you wouldn't have found alone.
I honestly don't feel like it's that much about understanding. If you're talking about these once great players who are now not doing as well, like, I'm not gonna say any names here, but if you look at these guys play, like their mechanics, they're just very slow and inaccurate compared to a lot of the other players that are doing really well. So I think maybe just everyone got a lot better mechanically, and these players just lost their fire or whatever to like try hard, practice hard. So I'm not sure if the whole practice and understanding thing really applies there. I think it's just some lack of motivation.
So you think that with these people that you're referring to, it's something that they could fix. It's not that their mechanics are just beyond repair. It's something they could correct. It's a matter of they don't care enough to anymore.
Yeah. For example, someone like Stefano is a very obvious example who still plays, but he doesn't really try as hard. He just has fun, shows up at tournaments eventually and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you look at his play, he's actually making some smart decisions sometimes, but he's just very slow. He kind of falls behind in the early mid game because his timings aren't as crisp as some of the other players who maybe practice a lot. So I think it's just a matter of not trying as hard anymore.
Actually, yeah, Lycan, do you remember us casting Bunny versus Stefano at DreamHack in the group stage?
Yeah.
Because that's like a game I'm thinking of as you say this. Bunny is like, he was like so screwed. Like he defended like your first Hellbat push really well, but then you basically just like went like full mechanic mode mech, and you were just like dropping Hellbats and like annoying him with Banshees. And like I don't think he uses camera location hotkeys if I remember correctly, and you could see it in his inability to deal with the constancy of your harassment. He couldn't keep up his macro while pulling drones away and microing against you harassing just constantly. And even though like he should have been like a little bit ahead or like even after he stopped your first Hellbat push, I think it was, he kind of just fell behind over time. And then we saw him down in supply versus mech for like the longest time, and he kept taking like the most perfect engagements I've seen. Like, and that's always been one of Stefano's great points. And like there's quite a few things he was doing well. But looking at it, I was like, he could still be one of the absolute top tier players if he wasn't down in supply the whole time. If he could keep up in with your multitasking in the earlier stages, because like some of his fighting was brilliant. Like his engagements can just be so artful sometimes. So it is interesting to see that. It's like, damn, maybe if this was just a bit different and the mechanics were there is that raw talent in a player like Stefano that really has the potential to thrive. But obviously, it's not really his focus right now.
Yep. So I guess I feel like in a way we've come around. What do we do? What is it? Just a matter of players don't decide that they want to improve, that they want to get better, that eventually the foreign scene, or maybe more so the North America scene, is going to die off, and there will be just the few left who stick around and want to put that work in. Is that what's going to happen, or this isn't just a North America problem in StarCraft. It seems that I don't know much about Dota, but I've been following a little bit of League of Legends lately, and it seems that League of Legends has the exact same thing. You read the stories about these team houses where they have the exact same problem. It's people not willing to practice, not willing to put in the time and effort to practice specific things that are an issue. So what do we do to get the change in mentality?
I think that just in general, it's a very natural evolution of esports, right? Where we are slowly learning how to incorporate all of the things every other sport has been doing for decades into our game and into our realm. The world of like being a pro gamer is a relatively new thing if you consider like the span of sport and competition. And the idea of pulling from areas like fighting and like music and conventional sports and learning how to incorporate them into StarCraft and into other esports is something that's been happening, and it's going to happen more and more. I think we're moving in a positive direction right now, and that's going to be more of a thing. Personally, I think that the main thing is teams need to have coaches, and not just people who are played StarCraft once and are good, but people whose expertise is in coaching.
Have you ever thought about, and this for all the pros here, have you ever considered, or now, do you think it would be worth it to find someone that is that person? And since you guys don't have, big teams with a bunch of B players and stuff to work with, would it be beneficial for you all to pay someone that is skilled in coaching to kind of just coach, 10, 20 of you, right?
Personally,
to act as it.
I've been actually talking to someone that's been helping me out some, but like in general, it's like really hard to find that person. Like the resources are very limited to obtain a coach that's willing to help you, simply because it's like not many people out there have the time to do it or have as much understanding as you do as well. Like the thing about like when you're thinking about a Korean house, it's like a lot of those coaches have been experienced with the field for a long time, like relative to like StarCraft, for instance, and then they're all living together. So it's like a coach can always gather more and more information. Whereas in the foreign scene, it's like the coach is very limited because, for one, it's very hard to find one that's motivated to go talk to all these other individuals as well. Like, it's not a matter of like a player stepping up and finding a coach. It's a matter of a coach coming out and willing to put in the work to do this.
Well, I think too. There's a lot of I don't know how to, exactly how to put it, but from Robert's perspective, who is basically a coach more or less, and he does his thing. He's got his master's in performance psychology. He does strength and conditioning with athletes. Like he's got the skill set, right? But he'll go up to players and say, hey, like, I think you're really great. I think you got a lot of potential. Like, I want to coach you. I want to help you out, all this stuff. And they'll be like, no, I think I'm okay, man. And, there's a lot of that kind of stuff going around where there's a lot of, arrogance where it's like, I don't need you. It's like, oh, you're not a grandmaster at StarCraft. It's like, how could you possibly help me kind of thing. I think overcoming that is a big deal.
In the foreign scene, it's like really hard, I feel, for a foreigner to want to accept someone that they feel isn't really experienced at all. Like, even if they are experienced, like, it's like, if they don't see their name out there, they're not going to want to work with it.
Maybe partly getting burnt by, like, too many random people pretending to be people they aren't in esports.
And actually, like, especially for streamers, like, you always get offers of people wanting to, like, do something to help you out. And it's like, if you give them a chance, a lot of times it's, like, not helpful at all, and you're just wasting time that you could be putting elsewhere.
Yeah, I think definitely when someone says, like, I've got, accreditation, I've got my performance psychology masters, it's something which is really helpful. And we haven't really talked about scheduling much, but I think scheduling is something which does help players a lot, and that's something which we've seen since TLO's been talking to Robert. He's obviously, and it was around that whole time he started really focusing on his scheduling balance, which was partly to start off to help out with his wrists, but then ended up becoming, I think, his whole way of practicing and kind of the esports lifestyle. But I think some people, like, you just get so many people who are like, oh, this is esports, it's exciting, like, I want to be involved. And I think people just get used to being approached by people who are like, I'm a CEO of graphic design and I'm gonna design you a website, something, and like, you're like, oh, what? Like, and you just get these weird messages from people, and then they message you a bunch of times, and you're like, well, sure, like, this sounds great, you want to help me out, okay. And then nothing really ever eventualizes, and you're like, okay. So you I think people just end up being cynical because they're on the internet. So if they don't actually know of someone's reputation, then they're very, very hypercritical. And there is a bit of elitism as well. There's a bit of players just being like, well, you're not a GM, what could you know? I know for me, like, for the longest time, just talking to my girlfriend, she doesn't play much at all, obviously, but it's just about, like, for me, like, having someone to communicate with and talk about, like, my own issues, because I think trust is one of the most important things when it comes to coaching, scheduling, getting advice on how you're progressing. Is you need to trust someone. If an environment doesn't feel comfortable, then people aren't as comfortable sharing ideas and communicating in it. So I think that's something people need to find, is, like, close friends in the community or in real life that they can actually talk to and kind of help them progress. Because realistically, working at anything, whether you're studying in school, university, you're learning some sort of profession, it's pretty similar in a lot of regards to learning how to be a competitive player, in that you've got to put in work in a certain organized way, and you've got to keep looking for new ways to improve different aspects. And if you just kind of just play or just try to be, good at uni without having any real approach or strategy, you're usually going to progress much, much slower. You're going to have to put in 10 times the work.
Right. One last thing, we're going to wrap this topic up. Bunny, I have a question for you. You guys had Coach Park at the EGTL house, right?
I wasn't there.
You weren't there?
That's for me.
Okay. So, when you worked with him, did it feel like you were working with him, or you were working for him, that you answered to him because, for your team's sake, or did he feel like an authority figure or a partner?
No, I mean, I feel like he filled the, it felt to me like he was a coach in what I would expect from a coach. But the language barrier, I feel like I didn't really get a whole lot of gameplay advice,
Okay.
but it was more about he would say stuff like manage your condition, you know, go get some sleep, stuff like this. Very rarely did I actually get any input about my play. That's usually what I got from the other players in the house. And um, I think what a lot of people need the most is probably gameplay related. I'm not saying that the other stuff is not necessary or not very useful, but I think for most players, that's what's going to help them the most. And a lot of the time, it's really difficult for us to see the flaws in our play because we're so, you know, it goes back to the thing about the habits. A player that's all inning every single game and having success with it, you know, is a great player. It could be GM, could be top 50, but it's not an approach that's going to work because it's predictable and it has its limits. And I think on average, the thing that holds the non-Korean scene back the most is gameplay related, and not so much psychological or physical, you know, shape and stuff. I think it's mostly about gameplay, and in that department, it's really difficult to find any coaches besides yourself and each other.
Okay. Well, I'm going to give the final thought to someone who's been very quiet, but he always keeps quiet and then just says very profound things when he does speak. Neuro, do you have any final thoughts on this topic before we move along?
Yeah, we've covered a lot of fantastic details, but the thing that people should put right in front of them is to take some very serious goddamn responsibility for themselves and what they're doing. The part of the community you would influence most is yourself. The way you can improve the foreign scene the most directly is by improving your own gameplay. So we can complain about shit all day. We can talk about systemic problems. We can talk about the big kind of cultural and professional advantages of different groups. But when all of this talk is over, life resumes and people can take immediate steps to get better. It doesn't have to be a huge step, but if it's a small step, that's progress. And it's about creating habits of making small progress every day for yourself personally.
Perfect.
Damn.
Wonderful. All right. So with that, we're going to go to a break. When we come back, we will talk commercials. Commercials. What? We'll talk,
Talk about commercials.
We'll do questions. I'm going to actually take the time during break to read the questions so I don't stumble or read your stupid troll questions. And we'll get that on the way. So with that, we'll be back in a couple minutes. Talk to you soon.